Rosed FC, and Adam and James. I'm not going to lie, this is the most excited I've been for one of our equally most excited I've been for one of our chats after the wonderful Awima Bill Socceroo, who's playing at Castellon, the fantastic Spanish club. We mentioned that the owner of that club is a very, very interesting individual. He's described on the internet as Canadian sports betting wizard. He's also as the future of football, and I once heard him in an interview say that he was furious at losing to a coach wearing skinny jeans.
No, that's not true. I never said that's not true. I never said I was furious. I just said
it can't happen.
But yeah, if I can't beat a coach wearing skinny jeans, then I got to reevaluate my decision-making process.
That is fair enough.
To be fair, it's a lot of coaches now are wearing skinny jeans, and there's some coaches that whipped our ass, I think, last year wearing skinny jeans. So I'm all good with it now.
To be honest, I think the whole culture of, I don't think there are any managers who wear suits or tracksuits anymore, especially in Spain. I think it's like chinos and a t-shirt. Maybe you get a jacket.
I mean, in Spain, it's interesting. Yeah, in Spain, it's interesting. Like, in the third division, there was like guys wearing, like some really aggressive club wear, like really tight acid wash jeans, and are great coaches. So just everyone has their own design aesthetic, I guess, and you just have to be comfortable with it. But I make my guys wear club wear, like actual football club wear, not going to the club wear if they're gonna coach my team. So just to avoid all of that.
Bob, I hope it's okay. We do the Australian thing and make things as colloquial as possible. We'll go with Bob if that's okay, unless you tell us otherwise. Mate, just a really wide one first up in a football sense. What's your philosophical view of how a football club should be owned and run?
I think it depends on. I mean, everyone has their own view on that. My personal view is I like the fact that I'm the person who has the most, I guess, not just like financially invested, but emotionally invested in the club. So like I have the best interests of the club in mind. So I like being the decision maker. It doesn't make sense for me to have someone else making decisions on which players to sign, which coaches to hire, etc. When their interests are just aligned to keep their job. So I think the alignment of interest is good. That's my philosophical thing, is to make sure there's an alignment of interests. And in Castellon there is, because I'm the decision maker and also the owner, and so I have the best interests in theory of the club. So that's part of it. But it's different for everybody. I mean, I understand also other people own clubs for different reasons, and maybe they don't want to make the decisions, or also maybe they don't have the experience or the qualifications to. Some could argue that I don't either, but I disagree. So I'm just doing it the way I think is best for the club and how I would want to run it.
Bob, I was going to ask you, actually, we'll come on to obviously your journey into football, essentially spruiked for us by our Irma Bill chat last time out. But for somebody that's had the history of making calculated decisions based on data and things like that, how have you found going into an industry like football, where there are so many people that make decisions based on, be it things they did as a player, things they've experienced that they don't think people outside of football understand, those kind of things? How have you found that, taking your approach that has been so successful for you in the gambling world, and then obviously with the Dallas Mavericks and things like that, into a world of football where those old school opinions are so prevalent and quite hard to circumnavigate?
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, I think the main thing is as long as the person's coming from a good place, you have to respect their experience and you have to respect their views on how they make decisions. Doesn't mean that you always have to agree, but you certainly have to have respect for it. And so what I try to do is I try to separate like feelings from facts. So if someone has like a feeling about a player and they can't really quantify, I have a lot of trouble investing in that feeling. And so, but it hasn't been that difficult, to be honest. I mean, look, I get to pick and choose who works for me and who works with me. And so if I find someone has a viewpoint such as that complements my approach, sometimes it's nice to have someone who has a different skill set and different experience, and you can work in a complementary manner that works. You don't want to have everybody thinking along the same lines. So you get that person's opinion, you evaluate it, and then at the end of the day, I'm going to make the decision, or we're going to make the decision as a group or whatever. But at the end of the day, I'm making the final decision. And so as long as that's being honored and you're honoring people's opinions and treating them respectfully, I don't think it's a problem at all. It shouldn't be. Now, if you're dealing with people who can't handle the fact that they're not the final decision maker, then that's less to do with, in my opinion, that's less to do with them having a non-stat background and having a football background. It's more of like a lack of maturity because they don't own the club. So if you really want to make all the decisions, go buy your own football club. One deal. So it's
simple.
No, I'm just being honest. Like it's just
it's true though.
I respect it, yeah. But at the end of the day, like I'm the one who's going to be here 10 years from now owning the club, whereas it's unlikely that a manager, for instance, is going to be with the 10 years. But I haven't really had it. I mean, I've had a little bit of problem with that with some managers who really pushed for players but couldn't really quantify why, and they come up with reasons, and then you would look at the data, but then you'd also just watch the video and be like, okay, but they always think they can change the player. Sometimes they can, to be fair.
Right. Yeah.
Like he'll be different with me. We play a different style, and sometimes that works, but sometimes it doesn't. And so you just need someone who's very honest with themselves and can really evaluate. It doesn't really matter what your background is. It's just, can you make good decisions with the information that you have? If your information is your experience and your feel and your knowledge of football, and you can make good, rational decisions, then we can work together. If you cannot, then we can't. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And on that though, I've tried to listen to every word you've ever spoken in public to get it ready for today. And I remember hearing on the Bill Simmons podcast where a lot of people were introduced to your wonderful, your ideas and stuff, and on the sport. And should every club have a successful professional gambler on staff? Because it seems to be like, that's, you've had, for people who've had skin in their own game and have been forced, I'm a comedian by trade, and Jerry Seinfeld says comedy is justice, because if you say it in front of a crowd and they don't laugh, it didn't work. And I feel like gambling's similar. If you've got a theory, but you tried at the racetrack and it loses, well, then you lost. It just feels like a good group of at least someone to have that in a football club seems to be like a really good idea.
I think so. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be gambling. It just has to be, you have to be able to predict things. And so you have to be able to not like do what's called retrodiction, which is you can go back and explain why something happened. You have to be able to make decisions going forward. And the problem with that is that the sample sizes have to be really, really big. It's very difficult to evaluate people's talents in different aspects unless you are using very, very large data sets. I think Ed's frozen, but maybe
he's just listening intently.
So it's less about gambling, I think, and more about your ability to predict and be able to understand that you're doing so in a reproducible manner. So it could be someone doesn't have to be a gambler, but it could be someone who's done really, really thorough research and can build models that can be back tested and reproduced in the real world. I think that's important. You have to be able to, because there's so much data in football. There's so much data in all sports, and you can get lost in it. And so if your goal is to justify signing a player, you can find data that will justify signing that player, but you can also find data to justify not signing the player. And there's enough data to find any story you want to tell. So you really want to avoid telling stories and more producing, something that will actually be predictable and going forward, that can predict the future.
So Bob, with your selection of players and how you work as, I don't know if it's a committee, and then you obviously have the final say of everything. Have you developed your own analytical database, or do you rely on, I've been across Y Scout, for instance, and I've got the benefits of Y Scout. I can see it, the things that leave you hanging a bit with, for instance, defensive pressures. It doesn't have a kind of figure for that. So there's some things that don't tell the whole story about a player. Have you gone down that path and that sets your template, or have you got your own?
We don't. I mean, we use Y Scout data to build our own models. But we also use Skill Corner, and we use, Skill Corner's camera tracking. And then we use other providers. We also partner with a company called Jamestown. I'm not sure if you heard of them, but so they're really good. And so, my specialty was basketball. Their specialty is football. And so it just makes sense to have them as an anchor to help us until we get really, really good at what we are on our own. So it's a combination of both. We don't really have a committee that we use. It's really just, people will send us guys who work for us will send, the coach will send us players, the sporting director will send, not sporting director because we don't have one, but like the recruitment director who manages recruitment in terms of signing the contracts and negotiating the salaries will send us pitches from agents. We use Transfer Room for that as well. And then we have our ratings, which is our rating. And then we have our third party ratings through Jamestown. And if the rating's good, we'll take a closer look. If the rating's bad, we probably won't, unless it's a young player who doesn't have a lot of data. Then I'll just make the decision as to whether we want to sign the player or not and for what amount. And that's kind of how we do things.
On that then, Bob, we take it onto like a football lens, if you like, when it comes to dealing with things like agents, dealing with coaches, third parties, players and salary requirements, everything like that, how have you found that experience of being in a world like football where obviously things like basketball, it's an enormous sport, but when it comes to things like football, you're dealing with millions and millions and millions of people from different languages, different countries, all people who want a piece of the pie, all people have a different recommendation for you. How have you found going into that world where it is there's a lot of information to kind of digest and pick your way through before ultimately making the decision and writing X amount of numbers on a check to sign a player?
Just different. Yeah. I mean, the agent part of it is probably the trickiest part because you have, like in America, an agent's just not getting the percentages they're getting in football. I don't know why up to these numbers. I'm not trying to, get into their pockets or whatever and ruin the game that they have or whatever the gig they have, but it just seems like it's just challenging, and I think it's also in America, you don't have player trading. You can trade players, but you can't buy and sell players and profit from it. Whereas our entire financial model is built around player trading. We need to profit from buying and selling players because we can't generate revenue, in other ways that will allow us to compete with the biggest clubs in Spain. We don't have a rich market. We don't have, like, our fans are working class. We don't want to charge them too much for tickets. We don't have a ton of advertising revenue, sponsorship revenue, et cetera. So we have to, even if we did, I think player trading is just the most lucrative part of this business. So we focus on that. The agents also focus on that because they get a percentage of every time a player moves. So, you have the part that I find to be the most interesting, I will say, is I try to be someone who is very accountable to my commitments and my word. So if I sign a contract, I'm honoring it. I spent 3 years in Dallas because I signed a contract, and after about 6 months, I didn't want to be there anymore. I signed a contract, so I stuck it out. Yeah. So when I have an agent tell me like, we just signed a 4-year deal, but now the player wants to move, I'm like, cool, get me the release clause or leave me alone. I want to be respectful to the player because players have dreams and aspirations, and they want to go to higher leagues, and so I want to be respectful. But I also think it's important for young players, especially young men, to understand the value of their word. And when you put your name on that piece of paper and you've said you're going to be here for 4 years, unless this happens, you need to also, it doesn't mean we can't negotiate, but at the end of the day, you signed a contract that says the club has your rights for 4 years, unless this dollar amount is met. So I don't get why that's just like, oh yeah, but that, nobody. If I would have known you were going to make me honor this commitment, I wouldn't have signed it. So, I've had that conversation. So I think that's just interesting. It's definitely, but it's like, you have to be very careful because there's lots of moving parts. There's if you try to be too rigid in your approach, your ability to recruit players from that agency might be, there's all kinds of variables that you have to kind of circumnavigate. It's kind of similar to, I guess, being a professional poker player and navigating how do I get invited to the good game type situation. It's probably very similar to that. So I can relate a little bit to that approach.
You spoke before about rational thought. This is more a question. It's like a question for life, and probably my wife would say that it's impossible. But can you have rational thought while at the same time being emotional about what you're doing?
I would hope so. I mean, you're always going to have, like, I think what you can maybe you can't have rational thought immediately after you lose a football match, and that's something really bad. Is you had a loss. It's 5 minutes after you're not. I've been around people who can't be rational. Then my rule then is just not to engage in conversations at that time. So, but the next day you should be able to have a rational. Like for me, I don't ever like to talk about a match with a coach or a manager or anyone until I went back and watched the match again. Because when you're watching it live, your brain's not rational. I've had so many opinions about a player, how he played that game. Yeah. And then I went back and watched it. and I've been like, oh, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Yeah.
What's it
It's just
like?
normal. It's normal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
My wife would say that about my behaviour, but anyway.
Look, Adam, that's a separate podcast, and Bob doesn't have that issue. He's like this. I've been watching. So Awir Mobile is obviously a great person, and he's a great footballer, and we're thrilled that he's there. So I've been watching as many of your highlights as I possibly can, and the style is it's must watch YouTubing, Bob. It is attack. And I saw one game where Awir Mobile was playing on the right wing, and there were two blokes who were further out to the right than he was. It was unbelievable. There was like three right wingers, and you scored a goal. When you're in the stadium, because it's such a great little stadium and it's packed to the rafters every week, what's the vibe towards you in the stadium as the games are going on? What's your relationship to the fandom in that moment?
I think when the games are going on, nobody really cares about me. They care about the game, which is what should happen. The football comes first, the players come first. But the fans are they're positive. I mean, they're happy. I mean, they should be happy. I think the club has done well so far, so we haven't really given anyone a reason to be upset. I mean, I think like even from the very beginning, the fans were welcoming. They were like, if you think about it, like, oh, some foreigner comes to buy the club. We've got this background who immediately, fires the sporting director, brings his dog with him everywhere he goes. Like there was a lot of room for disrespect or whatever, or just like, hey, what is this guy doing? But for whatever reason, they're very welcoming. They're just a welcoming people. They had an open mind, which is nice. Right. And I don't know. It's like, look, like I said this before. It got mistranslated because I guess in Spanish, you have to be really, really careful with the words you choose in anytime you're speaking a non-native language and it gets translated into their native language. But but like I'm someone who's not from the area. So like if anyone's really doubting my intentions, like I'm not like people think, oh, he's in it to make money. Like I have lots of this is not a good business to make money. I'm doing it. No, it just really isn't.
Yeah,
like,
that's true. I know.
Do other stuff. I mean, yeah, like if I get my money back, I'll be happy. But if I don't, I won't really care. Like I want to get the club to succeed. I'm not trying to turn it into some political lever to get more, to develop housing around or hotels around the beaches or whatever. I just want to build a football club that's successful. I want to prove that my methods work because that's kind of what I believe in and I enjoy, and it's fun for me. It's serious, and so. But with that, you have to also understand that there's going to be decisions that are made that people won't understand and they won't agree with, and they just kind of have to deal with it because at the end of the day, the fans are stuck with me, whether they like it.
That's good though. It's good to know that they're stuck with you. I love that. We're looking at this John Textor thing going on with this multi-club ownership. It's like they're trying to game the global system, some of these owners, and you're like, that's not the point. You know what I mean? It's so much better to hear, what you're saying, that they're stuck with you. That's a great thing to hear.
And the thing is, I'm just all about sport. That's it. I just want to win. So, so what more could you ask for? And I think they understand that and they appreciate that. And so maybe they don't agree with some of the decisions, but at the end of the day, I'm not doing them for any other reasons than I want to win. And I think this is how I know how to win. So if it works, then amazing. If it doesn't work, then we'll know sooner. But so far, it's pretty hard to doubt our sporting success. I think people have said like, oh yeah, they're off the field, they're doing a great job. Sporting is really bad, but like, I don't know. I've owned the team for 3 years. We almost got promoted the first year, broke every record the second year, got promoted. And the third year, our first year in the league, competing with teams with 7 times the budget, we compete. And we're going to make a lot of player sales this year or the next that will allow us to prime the pump a little bit to grow. So that's good.
So Bob, for the benefit of our listeners who may not be fully across your story. So in a snapshot, I'd be right in saying that you were a successful gambler on NBA in particular, or basketball, to then get a job as the head of quantitative and development at Dallas Mavericks. The decision to go and buy a football club seems like something that is miles outside the realm that you built of being everything was done with data and analytics and with a theory that had been tried and tested. So was the decision to buy Castellon an emotional decision for you? Because it seems on the outset, it seems like a really, really, I mean, to go and pick a team that's relatively unknown to a lot of people in Europe in the third tier of Spanish football who'd been in La Liga a couple of times and have bounced around the divisions. It seems like a decision that would have most people saying, what the hell? Like how and why has he done that? So was it based on emotion that you wanted to do something different and try something new?
Yeah, that if you want to, I mean, that's, yeah, I wasn't like calculating every, yeah, of course look, it's the picking the club itself was, it wasn't my first choice of clubs. We were looking at other clubs. We weren't able to close the deal. And then this club presented itself, and I was using a firm that was helping me find clubs, and the firm definitely was looking for a gig so they could continue working for the club. And so they kind of convinced me this was the right club, and I trusted them, and I'm happy. But it definitely, like, if I were to look back on it in terms of, I was definitely, it was certainly emotional because there was not a lot of rational. There's certainly other opportunities that might have been more, I guess, more advantageous. But that being said, it's worked out really, really well. And yeah, it's interesting because, like, part of it was I wanted to buy a football club to begin with. I got into it. We got into studying football a lot more, especially during the COVID times, and there was like the only sport going for a while. So that was kind of when it started. Friends who own football clubs, who also were gamblers, who have been very, very successful. So it's not like I'm trying something that's never been tried before. So if I can approximate their success even to a certain, like, not even a full amount, but like half or a third, like if I can be a third good at this as Tony Bloom is, that's pretty good. That's probably better than most other clubs.
Absolutely.
So that was kind of the idea behind it. It's been fun. I was already living in Europe for part of the year anyways, and so it made sense. It's nice. I like living in Europe. I live in Monaco. It's an hour away from. It's like not a bad place to live. It's like a lot better than living in fucking Irving Plaza in Dallas. That's for sure. Right?
You really took to Dallas, didn't you, Rob?
People in Dallas that I interacted with were actually really, really pleasant. But it's just very urban. Yeah. Like concrete environment, freeways, and I lived in an area where they turned there was an underground tunnel, and they built above the tunnel. They built a park above it. That's just how much concrete there is. They had to build a new park over the tunnels they'd built in the 80s.
Right. Okay. Fun. Yeah. It sounds great.
So with your investment, you're obviously very happy. It feels like you're in a monogamous relationship with your football club. Have you got any desire, because we can point you in the direction of Australian football, where we can tell you that the players are completely underdevalued in the transfer market.
Yes.
You can get a cheap buy. We can point you in the right direction of certain clubs down here. Or is it just not on your radar? You just want to stick to getting your team from the second division, where you've done so well and you scored 65 goals last season. I think only two.
Originally the thought was maybe doing multi-club, just not because we're trying to turn this into like a business, just to be able to. There's certain restrictions that you have in Spain in terms of how many players you can bring from different countries.
Right. Yeah.
So, depending on the passport of, like, right now we're locked in. We can't have any more foreign players that aren't either European or African passports.
Right.
You're only allowed 2 of those.
Right.
So,
okay. Wow. Okay.
But the other part of it is with every club you own, there's just a whole other emotional commitment of dealing with another manager, dealing with another. It's just too much. And so for me, I value my life where I don't want to turn this into. No, I want to do this. I want to put my time and effort into it, but I want to do other things. So other things too. So I'm not looking at buying another club, even though I was earlier. I just think doesn't make sense.
Let us know if you change your mind.
The one thing I'd love to bring you back on very quickly is listening to a previous podcast that you were on was an anecdote where you said that the team had, I think it was a couple of injuries, and the head coach phoned you to get your opinion on what you thought was the best way forward, and you completely disagreed with his decision. I think it was a defensive strategy or something like that at the Mavericks.
Exactly. I don't remember I don't recall.
I think it was something along the lines of, you said we have to go with a 5-man defensive unit or something like that. He's talking about
the Mavericks. He's talking about when your center went down for the Mavericks that year, and you suggested to go 5 out to Carlisle.
Rick Carlisle. But that's not defense. That's like 5 up. It's just
Please
an
excuse
offensive
James as he attempts a basketball reference.
He
Did well. He actually did all right there, Bob. That was actually not bad from him.
No, I was pretty, I didn't have no idea. I thought he was talking. No, it was just an offensive philosophy that had kind of been developed by, I mean, the Milwaukee Bucks were the first ones to do it. It was like 5-out spacing. In other words, all 5 players had to be able to shoot 3-pointers and to space the floor. And so, and I thought that was it's interesting now because that was the meta. That was the meta. And then now it's more movement, whereas we had very little movement in our offense. And now the same coach is coaching Indiana using 5-out scheme, but with a lot more movement. So it was always changing.
It was the question I was going to lead into was that have you had similar interactions in football, or do you kind of stay away from that now, and the people that you have put in place, you trust them to do it, or is there still a part of you that wants to be that involved as a club owner?
I'm involved in the sense where I ask questions, but it's more just to understand why we're making, like I let the manager make the decisions, but I want to understand how he's arriving at those decisions.
Okay.
So I can evaluate whether he's making good decisions. So if he's arriving at the decisions because he just is certain that's the way you're supposed to play, but can't explain it, and that's different than someone who could say, no, we're doing this because this is why, and this is why I think it'll work. And so, yeah, I'm pretty hands off when it comes to playing style. Like I pick coaches that already align with how I want to play, which is very offensive. So I'm not going to hire a defensive coach and then tell him this is how you have to play. That's just nonsense. You could find plenty of coaches who already play that way. And so we use a lot of data to evaluate coaches, and we feel like there's a positive expectation way to play football, which is it's going to help you sell the players because you have more offensive output. It's going to make it a lot less likely that you have ties because the games are higher scoring. You want to avoid ties because you get 3 points for a win and 0 for a loss and 1 for a tie. So a loss isn't that much different than a tie. So we avoid draws, right? So
you sure do. You really do. I love it.
Yeah. So it's just, but it's just smart to avoid draws. And so you want to be more high variance. You want to have more 4-3 games or 3-1 games than 1-0 games. So,
well, Bob, we've got our time is running out. Can I interest you in a coach? He's got a similar Greek family immigrant background to yourself. He's just won a European trophy. He is a friend of the three of us. He is currently
this is a legitimate one, not someone you're trying to offload because you don't like the way your team is playing. It's a legit.
No. This is legit. He just won the Europa League. He's also won the Asian Cup. He's also won the Japanese League. He's won the A League. He is like yourself. He's Scotland, sorry, you're right. He won with Celtic as well. He's just been relieved with his duties at Tottenham after giving them a trophy.
I don't think I would vibe well with him based on what I've seen in his press conference.
Would you mind if we tried to set up an introduction for you and Mr. Ange Postecoglou?
We have a coach. Very happy with our manager. So
just to hang out, though.
I got to say, from a footballing perspective, I sent a picture to the guys before because obviously for those who listen, if you're unaware, Almeria is my team. And as Alweir pointed out, they got slapped twice last year by Castellon. But the new kit that you guys released, we got the pictures overnight, is sensational.
Delicious.
I'm glad you guys like it. Yeah.
It is absolutely. It's spot on. Now our mission is to make Castellon everyone in Australia's second Spanish team. Not, that's our mission for going forward, Bob, because we're all in here. So we're here if you need.
Find me a koala or a kangaroo and give me some sizes, and I'll send over some kits, and we can start.
God, this is this is great. Well, we can get it on. Adam hosts the coverage of the biggest sporting soccer in here in Australia, and mate, we'll get it. I
love Australia. I've spent time in Australia. I was there in Melbourne for the Australian Open, and they used to do the Aussie Millions poker. So I used to go there every year from 2007 to Crown.
Come down and clean up and wander off.
Yeah.
Do they still have I know it's a very old school thing in football, whether you kind of been introduced to it or not. Do they still have card schools at the training ground? Do any of the players play poker?
The younger kids don't. Our don't. They do a little bit of they play like Uno, which is and they'll play like others, but not. They keep to themselves. Everyone's got their headset and their phone.
I know.
And they're doing their own thing.
Yeah.
And but the basketball players at the Mavs were definitely gambling on the plane for sure.
Yeah, that
They
travels so
like-
much.
yeah.
Hey,
would have
Bob,
given
just
you
one
a
on
wide berth. They would have given you a
on
really
aware.
wide.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Stepping into the lines then. Aware Mabil, that you attracted to the club, obviously, and he's loving his time there. He told of the
He's
first
been
meeting
great.
that he was like, is he really the owner? But eventually he broke the
You
ice
love
and
the
it was all
dog.
good. He's a beautiful human being, isn't he?
Yeah, he really is. It's interesting because I watched a lot of the obviously we didn't speak to him beforehand, but we did like a lot of like social media research and see interviews with him, and he won like some award in terms of like a community service award at one club that he was at, and so he seemed like a really really good person, and it's turned out to be true. He's really really great energy, always smiling, always happy, very hardworking. Yeah, and a very good player, obviously. I think we're able to unlock some of his talents. So and he's also open-minded in terms of how to, change his approach a little bit to play with us. And it's been really, really, really nice to see.
Yeah, cool.
Yep.
On the football front. Obviously, the season gets underway in August. Realistically, an expectation. Do you put a kind of a goal for the team this year? Obviously, promotion would be the ultimate goal, but are you that kind of owner that says it's this or bust this season in terms of a coach and things like that? Or do you have to kind of be realistic with the budgets you're up against from the teams being relegated from the Liga?
Yeah, I don't think it's ever this or bust. Like when we were in third division the last year, and it was promotion, or like the only goal was promotion, direct promotion. We achieved it. This year, I think we have some goals. I think everyone in the club kind of knows what they are. I think it's I mean, the main thing is just trying to get better all the time. And so we last year, I think we were, in the top 5 or 6 spots for a big portion of the season, or the early portion of the season. And then we had a lot of injuries, and then teams kind of adjusted to us. So I don't know. Like, I mean, I think we have a realistic chance of being a very good team, and we can beat anyone. I mean, that's just like the league is so tight. All the teams, there's not much separating the best teams from the bottom teams. There's like 3 or 4 teams that are clearly not part of the league, and that happens every year in Segunda. And so if you remove those 3 or 4 teams, anyone else can beat anyone. And so our goal is just to be in the mix and to fight for, top spots for sure, and see what happens. But we have to also be respectful of the difference in budgets. But our team is plenty good enough. I don't think it's a valid excuse to say we don't have the resources or we don't have the players to compete, because we've proven that we do. We can compete with anyone. It's just a question of how we can maximize our approach to have the most success.
Well, we'd love to catch up again when the season's on and you guys are flying. But thank you so much for making time for Rose FC today. It's been a real pleasure. We're going to spread the word far and wide as much as we can in Australia. We want to get everyone going watching Castellon, because it is genuinely it's a great watch, and it's one of those stadiums that's got apartments that look over it, and it's packed. It's just great. It's really great. Bob Voulgaris, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the time. It was fun.